Starting today for the next 10 days, South Korea and the U.S. are staging joint military drills against ever-growing North Korean threats. Now, the exercises will be double the size of last year's Freedom Shield drills. For more, we turn to Professor Brian Myers. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. So, like I said, the scale of the drills will be twice as big. What's the reason behind increasing the scale?
Well, I think it's a few reasons. For one thing, the Americans are unhappy about North Korea's providing ammunition and weaponry to the Russian war effort in Ukraine, and they want to retaliate by upping the pressure on the Kim Jong-un regime. But the expansion of these Freedom Shield exercises is really the natural result of the expansion of North Korea's capabilities. For example, this year's exercises are going to include training for tracking and intercepting cruise missiles. Why? Because North Korea has made a great show of repeatedly firing cruise missiles this year. So it stands to reason that whenever Kim Jong-un shows off some new military capability, the alliance has to start training its troops to deal with it, and that naturally means bigger exercises.
So the expansion itself was no surprise. That's what you're saying. South Korea's first military spy satellite has reportedly managed to successfully take good resolution images of North Korea's capital Pyongyang back home following the launch back in December. Now, how big of a deal is this?
Well, it's certainly good news for the South Korean administration if it can get a better look at central Pyongyang, because that's where Kim Jong-un's office and other key institutions are located. Also, this gives Seoul a certain propaganda victory over Pyongyang, which made a big fuss last November about its new reconnaissance satellite and its alleged ability to photograph sensitive military sites down here. But, from a security standpoint, this doesn't make things much better for Seoul. It doesn't make things much worse for Pyongyang, because the Americans have had the necessary satellites for some time already. And besides, we don't really know if the next South Korean president is going to want to maintain this capability. The Moon administration scaled back reconnaissance and espionage activity in order to reassure Kim Jong-un that South Korea wanted a more trusting relationship, and a future government here could very well revert to that sort of policy. So I don't think it's very big news, to be honest.
Definitely. Now, according to South Korea's defense chief, though, North Korea's spy satellite launched in last November in 2023, is not doing anything productive as the one that South Korea has launched. How is it looking so far? What do you think?
That is indeed how it's looking, that it's not working. Apparently this Maligyong-1, which we talked about here on Arirang at the time, is in orbit, yes, but it doesn't appear to be functioning. It doesn't appear to be taking photographs and so on. On the other hand, who knows? Because tracking the orbit of a satellite is a lot easier than making absolutely sure that it's not sending signals. So I think it's possible that these doubtful statements are South Korea's way of trying to goad the North or provoke the North into providing more information about what that satellite is actually doing. In the past, Pyongyang has reacted very sensitively to any kind of downplaying of its technical advances. So we might well see the North Koreans respond to these statements by issuing photos. Even if they don't do that and the satellite isn't working, the alliance still has to deal with a greater problem, which is that North Korea has missiles that can put satellites into orbit. The missiles are a bigger problem than the satellites.
Right. So Seoul-Washington joint military drills starting in March, and also a quite sensitive comment from South Korea on the North's first spy satellite. Professor Myers, do you think they could potentially trigger provocations from the North in the month of March?
Yeah, these exercises are always a big irritant to Pyongyang. You remember when Kim Jong-un and Trump had their summits, Kim was always trying to get the Americans to suspend the exercises or downscale them, because they place a really big burden on North Korea, which has to spend money and use up oil on its own counter exercises. And for obvious reasons, Pyongyang is really angry about the Americans using assets in exercises like nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and strategic bombers. Last year, during Freedom Shield, we saw military tests from North Korea. We saw an ICBM-class missile fired, along with short-range missiles. So I think it's highly likely that we will see something like that before these exercises are over. even more so because this is election season in South Korea right now.
Right. Professor Myers, also at the same time, European embassies in North Korea are looking to reopen after 4 years of being closed due to the pandemic. Why is the North now allowing them to come back? Is it because pandemic is over or any other reasons?
Well, I think a big reason is the reestablishment of ties between Seoul and Havana. That must have been quite a blow to Pyongyang's pride, considering what close allies North Korea and Cuba had been since about 1960. North Korea and Cuba were the only two countries that boycotted the Seoul Olympics in 1988. So this setback, I think, may have reminded Kim Jong-un of the dangers of relying too heavily on, say, 2 or 3 friendly countries. Obviously, the North's relationships with Russia and China are in very good health. But even so, it's always better to keep your friends on their toes by making clear that you have other options. And I think from a domestic political standpoint, from a domestic propaganda standpoint, it's good for the regime to show that countries like Germany, Switzerland, the UK place importance on maintaining relations with Pyongyang.
Right, maybe a hint of desperation trying to keep its circle of own friends. All right, Professor Myers, thanks so much for your insight. As always, you have a great day.
You too. Thank you.